The planet Zirin hung beneath a silver sky. Its towers rose like crystal spears, shining in the light of two suns. For the first time in history, a human ship had landed there not for battle but for peace. The war between the humans of Sol and the Zirin Empire had burned for 7 long years. Thousands of lives were lost on both sides. The Council of Earth had chosen one man to speak for humanity. His name was Rian Vale, a soldier-turned-envoy who believed peace was still possible even after so much destruction. Rian stepped out of the shuttle, his boots pressing against the smooth white platform of the alien capital. Around him stood the Queen's guards, tall figures with glass-like skin and eyes that glowed blue. They watched every move he made, their weapons ready, though hidden. Rian carried no gun. He had come dressed in a simple black uniform with a silver crest of Sol on his shoulder. He bowed slightly toward the royal platform where the Queen waited. The air was warm, heavy with the scent of strange flowers, and every heartbeat echoed in the silence. Queen Saral of Zirin stood before him in a gown of silver threads. Her crown shimmered with living light. She was tall, graceful, and her face looked almost human except for her luminous eyes. Behind that beauty, Rian sensed a sharp intelligence and a careful distance. She had seen humans only through war records and the broken bodies of her soldiers. To her, humans were violent creatures, dangerous and unpredictable. The Queen raised her hand and her translator orb floated near her shoulder, converting her melodic speech into human tongue. "Welcome to Zirin, Envoy of Sol. I accept your presence here under the shield of truce. Speak your purpose." Rian's voice was calm and deep. "Your Majesty, I bring the words of peace from Earth. The war has cost too much. Both our peoples have suffered. We must find another way." A murmur rippled through the alien court. Some whispered that humans only spoke of peace when they were too weak to fight. Others said this man was a trap. But the Queen lifted her hand, silencing them. "You wish for peace," she said. "And yet it was your kind who first crossed our borders." Rian nodded. "And it was yours who struck back. Both sides are guilty. That is why I am here, to end the guilt before it destroys us all." For a moment, Saral said nothing. She studied him closely. His eyes were calm, yet she could see the faint lines of battle fatigue. There was no fear in his stance, only determination. It confused her. The stories of humans said they were savage and undisciplined. Yet this one stood like a soldier carved from stone, speaking with respect and patience. The Queen motioned for him to follow. Together they entered the grand hall of crystal pillars. Light moved through the walls like living water. The air vibrated with quiet music from unseen sources. Rian walked behind her, his eyes tracing the alien beauty of the place. He could not help but admire the skill of the Zirin builders, who shaped matter with sound and thought. The Queen spoke again as they walked. "You have courage to come here alone," she said. "Do you not fear that I might order your execution?" Rian smiled slightly. "If you wanted me dead, Your Majesty, I would not have made it past your guards." That answer earned a faint flicker in her eyes, a spark of amusement or surprise. "You speak boldly for a fragile being," she said. Rian looked ahead. Fragile, perhaps, but not weak. They reached the throne chamber where long strands of crystal hung from the ceiling like frozen rain. Servants brought trays of glowing fruit and cups filled with shimmering water. Rian declined politely. He had been trained never to eat or drink during the first meeting with an alien ruler. Every gesture mattered in diplomacy. The Queen took her throne high and radiant. Her counselors lined the sides of the hall. "Tell me, Rian of Sol," she said, "what makes you believe humans and Zirin can ever trust each other again?" Rian looked up at her without hesitation. "Because trust begins with one choice. I chose to stand here unarmed in front of your throne. I believe you can make the same choice." The room fell silent. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. Most aliens trembled in her presence. Yet this human stood firm, his words simple and direct. Cyril found herself unsure how to respond. There was something in his tone, a quiet strength that felt heavier than pride. Before she could speak again, a sudden tremor shook the hall. The ground rumbled as the pillars vibrated. One of the support beams above cracked. The guards shouted and ran to protect the Queen. A sharp sound of metal breaking echoed through the chamber. A large shard of crystal fell from the ceiling, heading straight toward the throne. Rian reacted before anyone else could move. He leaped forward, pushing the Queen out of the way. The massive shard crashed down behind them, splintering into pieces. Dust filled the air. The Queen found herself on the floor, stunned. Ryan was crouched beside her, his arm bleeding from a deep gash. A sharp fragment had torn through his uniform, leaving a long cut along his flesh. The guards surrounded them instantly. They pointed weapons at Ryan, but the Queen raised her hand, stopping them. Her eyes widened as she saw the red liquid running down his arm. Human blood. She had never seen it before. The sight startled her. Xeran blood was clear and faintly blue, almost like water. But this red color looked alive, bright and powerful. It dripped down his fingers, yet he did not cry out. He tore a strip from his uniform and wrapped it around the wound, pressing tightly to stop the bleeding. "It's nothing," he said calmly, standing straight again. The Queen could not believe it. Even her strongest soldiers would have fallen unconscious from such an injury. Yet the human stood tall, his eyes steady, his breath even. The court whispered in shock. The royal healer stepped forward. "We must treat him," she said. But Rian shook his head. "See to your queen first," Saral found her voice again. "You are injured," she said. "You risked your life for me." Ryan nodded lightly. "Instinct, your majesty. On my world we protect those beside us." The Queen's gaze lingered on him. The human's words sounded simple, yet they struck something deep within her. None of her own guards had moved fast enough to shield her. None had placed themselves between her and danger. This human had done it without thought or reward. It unsettled her more than the quake itself. The healers guided Rian to a side chamber. His wound was cleaned with glowing gel that hissed faintly when it touched his skin. The Queen watched from a distance. He did not flinch once. His face remained calm, though the burn of the gel was strong enough to make most cry out. The alien doctors looked at him in awe. When the treatment was done, Saral approached him. "You could have died," she said. "Why did you act so recklessly?" Ryan looked at her, his tone steady. "Because you were in danger, and because peace dies if we keep letting fear decide our actions." Her eyes softened. She wanted to argue but found no words. His wound had already begun to close under the alien medicine, yet the memory of his blood stayed in her mind. That red color became a symbol she could not forget. It was pain and strength mixed together, something she had never seen among her people. That night, when Ryan was taken to his guest quarters, the Queen stood on her balcony and looked out at the glowing city. The quake had damaged one of the energy towers, but the people would repair it quickly. What lingered was not the damage, but the image of the human standing covered in blood, still protecting her even when surrounded by guards who could have ended his life. She felt something she had never known before, a strange respect mixed with curiosity. She called her advisor. "Tell me," she said, "are humans truly as fragile as we believed?" The advisor hesitated. "Their bodies are weak, your majesty, but their minds seem resistant. They endure pain differently." Saral looked out toward the stars where the human ship floated. "Then perhaps we have misunderstood them," she said quietly. Far above the planet, the Aurora's Pride orbited in silence. Ryan sat by the window of his chamber, his arm bandaged and sore. He stared at the twin suns and thought about the Queen's eyes when she saw his blood. She had flinched, but not out of disgust. It was something else, shock, maybe even empathy. He smiled faintly to himself. If one moment of pain could shake an empire's belief, then perhaps there was still hope for peace. The first step had been taken. The human had bled on alien soil, and the Queen had seen the truth behind the stories. The war had created walls of fear, but a single act of courage had opened a small crack in those walls. And sometimes, Rian thought, a single crack was enough to let the light through. The morning sun of Xyren rose over shining towers that caught the light like mirrors. The palace was calm on the surface, but whispers flowed through every corridor. The story of the human envoy who bled for the Queen spread faster than any command. Guards who had once mocked humans now spoke of Ryan Vale with uneasy respect. Servants peeked through doorways to catch sight of him, half expecting to see a fragile creature barely able to move. Instead, they saw him walking the halls with quiet strength, his arm wrapped in white cloth but his stride firm. Queen Saral sat in her throne room, listening to her counselors argue. Some demanded that the human be sent away before his presence caused more unrest. Others believed he should be honored for saving the Queen's life. The Queen said nothing for a long time. She sat with her chin resting on her hand, her glowing eyes focused on the silver floor. Her thoughts were far from their words. She kept seeing that moment again and again, when the shard had fallen and the human had thrown himself forward without fear. That image had carved itself into her mind like a mark that could not fade. Finally, she raised her hand and the hall went silent. Enough, she said. The human will stay. He risked his life under our roof. He will be treated as a guest of honor. The counselors exchanged uneasy looks, but none dared to speak against her. The queen's voice carried the weight of command, and even the proudest lords lowered their heads. Cyril stood and left the hall, her steps quiet against the shining floor. She walked toward the medical wing where Ryan rested after the previous day's event. Rian sat by the window when she entered. His uniform had been cleaned and his arm was wrapped neatly. The light from the twin suns fell across his face, revealing a calm expression. When he noticed her, he rose to his feet and bowed slightly. "Your Majesty," he said. Cyril motioned for him to sit. "You need not bow," she said. "You are wounded." "It is nothing serious," he replied. "Your healers did excellent work." She studied him for a moment, then spoke softly. "Why did you not let them help you first yesterday? You refused treatment until I was safe." Ryan looked out the window where the city spread like glass beneath the suns. "Where I come from, we have a saying," he said. "Leaders are only strong if those beside them are willing to stand when it matters. You are a leader of your people." I could not stand aside. The queen felt a strange warmth at his words. She had ruled for years with iron control, guided by logic and duty. Yet this human spoke with a simple truth that pierced through her guarded heart. His tone held no flattery, only honesty. For a ruler surrounded by those who spoke carefully to please her, that honesty felt rare. "You speak as if pain does not concern you," she said. "Yet your wound was deep. You lost much blood." Ryan smiled faintly. "Pain is part of living. It reminds us that we are still here." His words lingered in the air. The queen turned away, trying to hide the thought that had just crossed her mind. Could strength truly come from accepting pain rather than avoiding it? Her people spent centuries shaping a society where pain was erased, where weakness was hidden. The human way seemed foolish, yet strangely admirable. That afternoon, the queen called for a small council. Ryan was invited to sit beside her as a representative of Seoul. The room filled with high-ranking officers, ministers, and scientists. The topic was peace. A holographic map hovered above the round table, showing the scars of war that still marked the border systems. Ryan listened quietly as the Xeran commanders argued that humans could not be trusted. He waited for them to finish before he spoke. "Your fears are justified," he said. "Humans are not perfect. We make mistakes, sometimes terrible ones. But we also learn. Every wound teaches us something new. We are still learning how to be better," one general snorted. "You speak as if your kind learns faster than ours." Ryan shook his head. "Not faster, only differently. We are forced to learn because we break easily. When everything hurts, you either learn to endure or you fall apart." The room went silent again. Even the queen's oldest advisor, who had fought in 3 wars, had no answer. The queen looked at Ryan with quiet wonder. She could feel that he was not trying to win an argument but to share a truth. For the first time, she began to think peace might be possible. When the meeting ended, the queen walked beside Ryan through the palace gardens. The air smelled of soft nectar, and glowing birds moved through the air like floating lights. "Your words affected my council," she said. "Some of them will never admit it, but they respect you now." Ryan smiled slightly. "Respect is not what I seek. Understanding is," she nodded. "You speak like a philosopher, yet you act like a soldier." "I used to fight," he said quietly. "Now I try to make sure others do not have to." They stopped near a pool where light rippled across the water's surface. The queen looked at his reflection beside hers. 2 different shapes, 2 different worlds standing side by side. "Do you miss your home?" she asked. "Every day," Rian said. "But if peace can be made, then it will be worth it." Before the queen could reply, a messenger ran toward them, bowing low. "Your Majesty," he said breathlessly. "An incident at the North Gate. Some guards insulted the human envoy. They called him a deceiver. He did not respond, but a crowd has gathered." The queen's expression darkened. "Show me." When they reached the gate, a group of guards stood nervously as citizens whispered nearby. Ryan stood calm at the center. One of the guards had thrown his translator to the ground, shouting that no human should walk freely in the capital. The queen stepped forward, her voice cold. "Who dares disrespect a guest under my protection?" The guards fell to their knees. The leader tried to speak, but his voice shook. "Forgive us, Majesty. We only feared for your safety." "Fear is no excuse for dishonor," she said. "Leave your posts." "You are relieved." The guards bowed and left in shame. The crowd dispersed, murmuring among themselves. Ryan looked at her and said softly, You did not have to do that. I did, she said. If I cannot protect my guest, how can I claim to protect my people? For the first time since their meeting, Rian saw something human in her tone, a sense of care beyond duty. Thank you, Your Majesty, he said. That evening, as the sun set and the palace lights glowed like stars, the queen visited Rian again in his chamber. She brought a small crystal orb filled with blue light. This is a healing core, she said. It will strengthen your body while you recover. Rian accepted it with gratitude. You honor me, Queen Sorrel. You saved my life, she said. I only repay a part of that debt. He placed the orb near his bed and looked at her carefully. There is no debt between us. What I did was right. That is enough. The queen stood silently for a moment, unsure how to reply. In her world, every favor required repayment. Every act of loyalty came with an expectation. But the human spoke of actions done without condition. It was something her people had forgotten long ago. Before leaving, she turned to him and asked, Do all humans think like you? Rian smiled. No, but we try to. That night, Queen Sorrel sat alone in her private chamber. Outside, the stars shimmered like dust across the black sky. She poured herself a drink made from silver fruit and stared into its glow. The face of the human appeared again in her mind. His calmness, his endurance, his strange sense of hope, all of it unsettled her. She had ruled with logic for decades, but logic had never saved her life. A man from a distant world had done that instead. She touched the small scar near her shoulder where the crystal shard had grazed her during the quake. It was a reminder of how close she had come to death, and how a single human had stood between her and the end. She wondered what kind of world could raise people like him. Was humanity's strength born from pain, or from their refusal to give up? She looked out at the horizon, where the city lights faded into the distance. For the first time, she felt a spark of curiosity rather than fear about Earth. Perhaps humans were not the monsters the old stories claimed. Perhaps they were something far more dangerous, a species that refused to break no matter how many times they bled. And somewhere across the hall, Rian sat by the window, gazing at the twin moons of Zirin. He touched the bandage on his arm and thought of the queen's eyes when she had defended him before the guards. In that single act, he saw hope. He whispered softly to himself, Maybe this is how peace begins. Outside, the stars watched over them both. Two worlds, once enemies, now linked by one wound and one act of courage that refused to fade. The following days in the palace were tense. Though the queen had declared Rian Vale a guest of honor, not everyone trusted the human. Whispers ran through the halls like shadows, carried by courtiers and guards alike. Many still believed that humans were fragile creatures, capable of only short bursts of courage before collapsing. Some advisors urged Sorrel to send him back to Earth, warning her that one mistake could undo the fragile trust forming between their peoples. But the queen remained firm. She had seen him bleed. She had seen him stand tall in the face of danger. That image stayed burned in her mind and refused to fade. Rian spent his mornings in training. His arm, now healed from the previous wound, was still stiff. Yet he moved with precision, practicing the combat forms he had learned as a soldier. Each motion was careful and deliberate. Sorrel often watched from the balcony above, her eyes following every step. She wondered why a human would risk his body in this way when he was already in a foreign world. One day, she descended to speak with him. Why do you push yourself so hard, she asked. Your wound is healed, yet you train as if preparing for battle. Rian paused and looked at her, his dark eyes steady. Because trust is earned, Your Majesty. Your people have never met my kind up close. They do not know that humans endure pain and fear yet continue forward. I must show them, not just speak. The queen studied him. He had endured a wound that would have felled even her strongest soldiers, yet he moved as if nothing had happened. His body carried the memory of pain, but his mind remained calm. She had never met anyone like him. Perhaps this was why humans were feared across the galaxy. It was not their strength, it was their will. That afternoon, the palace alarm sounded. Rian had just finished training and was resting in his quarters when the alert reached him. He leaped to his feet instinctively. The queen's translator voice echoed through the halls, calm yet urgent. Rian Vale, the peace talks are under threat. Unknown assailants are attempting to attack the north gate. Protect the delegates, protect my people. Ryan did not hesitate. His training took over. His bandaged arm had healed fully, yet the memory of the last wound was still there, a silent reminder that danger was real. He moved through the palace corridors, alert and ready. Guards fell in line beside him, uneasy but following his lead. When they reached the gate, chaos unfolded. A group of masked attackers had gathered outside, their weapons drawn. They did not care for diplomacy. They wanted to disrupt the fragile peace talks and prove that humans could not be trusted. The Zyran guards froze, unsure of how to respond. The attackers moved with speed, striking at anyone who stepped forward. Ryan acted first. He grabbed a guard's arm and pushed him behind cover. He moved into the line of fire, shielding the Queen's delegates with his body. One of the attackers swung a blade toward him. Ryan caught it with his forearm, twisting the weapon aside. Pain flared through his skin, a sharp reminder of his mortality. But he did not fall. He struck back, using the attacker's momentum to throw him to the ground. Another came at him, but he sidestepped and knocked him off balance, all while keeping the delegates safe. Siral watched from the palace balcony. Her heart pounded, but she could not take her eyes away. She saw the human bleed again, a shallow cut along his side from a swinging blade. The red ran bright against his uniform, yet he did not stop. Every movement was precise, deliberate, controlled. He stood between her people and danger without a single thought for his own safety. The attackers, seeing the human continue to fight despite injuries, faltered. Their confidence wavered. Humans, they had assumed, would crumble after being hit. Yet this one continued, fluid and strong. One by one, the attackers retreated, shocked by his resilience. The Zyran guards followed him cautiously, still unsure if he would collapse under further attack. When the hall was finally safe, Ryan sank to one knee, breathing heavily. His uniform was torn and blood stained his side. A healer ran forward immediately, but Ryan waved her off. "I am fine," he said. "The delegates are unharmed. That is all that matters." Siral descended to his side. Her eyes scanned the wound, her glowing pupils narrowing with disbelief. "You could have died," she said, her voice trembling. "You risked yourself again for us, for me, for people who have never trusted your kind." Ryan looked up at her, his eyes calm despite the pain. "Courage is not the absence of fear, Your Majesty. It is acting despite it. Fear is natural, pain is natural. But letting them control your actions is a choice. I choose to act." The Queen's hand hovered near his arm, almost instinctively. She felt the warmth of his skin and the firmness of his muscles. She had never felt anything like it in her life. Humans were said to be weak, fragile, fleeting. Yet here was one standing before her, bleeding, yet unbroken. She felt a strange admiration, and perhaps something deeper, a realization that strength could take forms she had never considered. "Your people will need to see this," she said softly. "They will not believe me if I speak alone." Ryan smiled faintly, his expression tired but resolute. "Then they will learn. Actions speak louder than words." The Queen ordered her healers to treat his wounds thoroughly. They worked quickly, using alien methods of regeneration that left his skin smooth and strong. Still, the red bloodstains on his uniform and the memory of his movements during the attack were engraved in her mind. It was a symbol she could not ignore. The human had risked death to protect her and her people. That act alone had shifted her understanding. Later, in a private council, the Queen addressed her advisors. "The human is not a threat," she said. "He is an example of what his kind can be. We must consider that humans may be capable of more than we have believed." Some advisors murmured dissent. "Your Majesty, one individual does not define a species. We cannot ignore the danger humans pose." "Perhaps," she said, her voice firm, "but one human has proven that courage and loyalty exist. That is more than many of our own people would show under fire. Observe him closely. Learn from him. Trust cannot be demanded. It is earned. He earns it every day." That evening, Rian sat in his quarters, bandages cleaned and his side lightly bruised. Cyril entered quietly, carrying a small tray of nourishing food. "You must eat," she said. "Your body cannot endure much more without rest." Ryan looked at the food. "I am not hungry, Your Majesty. I have eaten little on this world since arrival, but my body can endure." The Queen set the tray down anyway. "You underestimate it. Strength comes not only from will but also from care. You must care for yourself to protect others." He nodded and began eating slowly. She watched him, noticing the quiet discipline, the calm patience. It was so different from her people, who demanded perfection and expected fear to be hidden. Humans were not perfect, but their resilience fascinated her. She could not deny it. "You know," she said softly, "you have changed how I see your kind." Ryan paused and looked up. "I only hope my actions speak for more than words ever could." The Queen smiled faintly. "They already have. You bled for me, yet you never faltered. That is more than any speech or treaty could achieve. That wound has shifted the hearts of those who saw it. Even I flinched when I first saw it, and yet it was a flinch born of realization, not fear." Ryan nodded. "Pain is a teacher. Sometimes it is the only teacher." Outside, the palace lights glowed beneath the twin moons. Citizens moved quietly in the streets, their eyes occasionally turning toward the palace gates where the human envoy had stood without hesitation. Stories would spread. Some would call him brave, others reckless. But every story carried the same truth. A human had faced danger without yielding. As night fell, the Queen returned to her private chamber. She poured herself a drink and stared at the twin moons above the city. The human had endured what her own people would have crumbled under. It unsettled her, yet inspired her. Perhaps humanity was not the fragile species the galaxy believed it to be. Perhaps the strength of a human was not in its body alone, but in the spirit that refused to bow, even in the face of death. In his quarters, Ryan sat by the window, feeling the night wind through the open lattice. His body ached, but the ache was welcome. It reminded him that he had acted, that he had protected life when it mattered most. And somewhere above, the Queen looked out at the same sky, her mind turning over the lesson she had learned. Courage was not bound by species. Strength could be found even in those thought weak. The first test of trust had passed. Humans had bled on Zyran soil, and the Queen had seen their endurance firsthand. The next steps would be harder, but Ryan understood that true courage was measured not by the absence of struggle but by the willingness to face it again. And that willingness, he hoped, would be the key to peace between two worlds. The palace of Zyran was quiet in the early morning. Light spilled across the crystal towers, painting the walls with soft shades of silver and blue. Inside the royal chambers, Queen Siral sat in her private hall, thinking about the human envoy Ryan Vale. His actions during the attack at the North Gate had left an impression she could not shake. He had risked his life to protect her and her people, and even when wounded he had continued to act without hesitation. Her advisors had tried to warn her again that humans were unpredictable. "One human cannot represent a species," one had said. "You must remain cautious." Siral had listened but found their words hollow. She had seen the truth for herself. The human's courage and endurance had shaken her understanding of strength. Humans might be fragile physically, but their spirit, their will, was something far more dangerous and inspiring than the strongest Zyran soldier. She could not dismiss what she had witnessed. At that moment, a knock came at her chamber door. "Enter," she called. Rian stepped in quietly. His uniform was neat, though the faint scar along his side still showed. He bowed slightly. "Your Majesty," he said. "Sit," Siral replied. She watched him carefully. "Your wounds have healed, yet you continue to push yourself." "Why?" Ryan took a seat on the cushioned bench. "Because trust is not given. It is shown through action. My presence here is a statement. My endurance is a statement. I cannot control what others believe, but I can show them that humans do not break so easily." Siral studied him. She remembered the bright red of his blood against his uniform. That single moment had changed something in her. It had cracked the wall of assumptions she had held for decades. "You are unlike anyone I have met," she said softly. Your kind is said to be weak, fragile, and short-lived. Yet I have seen you bleed and still continue. I have seen you act with clarity and courage. It is difficult to comprehend. Rian's eyes met hers. Strength is not measured only by the body. It is measured by what one chooses to endure and how one responds to danger. Humans may seem fragile, but our spirit is strong. That is why we survive. The queen leaned back, her hands resting on the arms of her throne. She felt a strange mixture of admiration and uncertainty. Her people had always valued control, logic, and order. Pain was to be avoided, fear hidden, weakness removed. And yet the human she had witnessed had acted without hesitation, embracing pain and danger without losing himself. That was strength she had never known. Over the next few days, Saral watched him closely. He moved among her people with respect, yet he did not fear them. He spoke clearly and honestly, never flattering, never hiding behind words. Guards who had once doubted him now followed his lead, learning from his calm efficiency. Citizens whispered about the human who had bled for the queen yet never faltered. His courage had become a lesson for all who watched. One afternoon, Saral visited Rian in the training courtyard. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the smooth stone floor. Rian was practicing combat maneuvers, his movements fluid and controlled. His arm had healed fully, yet he trained as if preparing for another attack. "You push yourself too hard," Saral said, approaching quietly. Rian paused and looked at her. "I train not for myself, but to show that humans endure." "Your people must see it," Saral shook her head. "You risk more than you realize. You are not invincible." "I am not," he admitted. "But courage is not measured by invincibility. It is measured by the choice to stand when others would fall." She watched him move again, the sunlight glinting off his uniform. Every motion was precise, every step calculated. He had been injured twice now, yet he continued to push forward without hesitation. The queen felt something stir in her chest, a realization she could not name. Humans were not fragile. They were not weak. Their strength came from within, from the spirit that refused to break no matter the pain. Later that evening, Saral invited Rian to dine in a small private hall. The table was simple, with fruits and grains from Zirin, and a small glowing orb that kept the food warm. They ate in silence for a while, the only sound the faint hum of the orb. Finally, Saral spoke. "Rian, do you know why your actions have affected me so deeply?" Rian looked at her quietly. "Because you saw something unexpected?" She nodded. "I have ruled for decades. I have faced enemies, guided armies, and seen countless injuries. Yet none of it changed my understanding of strength until I saw you. You bled, you were injured, yet you continued without hesitation. That is something my people rarely demonstrate. It is something I have rarely seen." Rian leaned forward. "Strength is not always obvious. Humans may appear fragile, but we endure. We act when it matters, even if it means risking ourselves." The queen considered his words. Her gaze fell on his scar, faint now running along his side. She reached out and lightly touched it. The warmth of his skin startled her. She had never touched anyone with such quiet courage before. "Your wound. It changed my understanding," she admitted. "I flinched when I saw it, not because of fear, but because I realized that humans are capable of more than I imagined." Rian nodded. "Then perhaps the world is not as limited as we once believed." Saral smiled faintly. "Perhaps not. You have shown me that courage can come in forms I never expected. Pain does not define weakness. Endurance defines strength. Your people may be small in number, but their spirit is formidable." Over the next week, the palace remained on alert. Word of the failed attack at the North Gate spread quickly. Citizens and soldiers alike had witnessed Rian's courage. Trust in humans began to grow, though slowly. The queen continued to observe him, noticing the quiet way he encouraged her people, the calm patience he displayed in the face of challenges. One evening, as the sun set over the city, the queen visited Rian's chambers again. He was reading a small data pad, taking notes on the culture and technology of Ziren. "You study our world carefully," she said. "I must understand it if peace is to last," he replied. "Strength is useless without knowledge. A brave fighter who does not understand the people he protects will fail." The queen nodded. "You are more than a warrior. You are a teacher, whether you intend to be or not." Rian smiled faintly. "Perhaps. I only hope my actions speak louder than my words." They stood in silence for a moment, looking out at the glowing city. The twin moons reflected on the towers, and the soft hum of the palace created a peaceful rhythm. Cyril thought about the future. The humans had proven that their courage was real, that their endurance was remarkable. She realized that if the people of Zirin could embrace even a fraction of that spirit, their world would be stronger than it had ever been. "Ryan," she said finally, "your presence here has changed more than the hearts of my people. It has changed my own understanding of what it means to be strong. I have never admitted this before, but humans are remarkable." Ryan looked at her carefully. "Thank you, Your Majesty. That means more than you realize." The Queen's expression softened. "It is not just words. Actions speak louder, and yours have been louder than any speech I have ever heard." That night, the palace was calm. Guards patrolled the corridors, and the citizens slept peacefully, unaware of the quiet lessons being learned at the heart of power. The human envoy had survived wounds that would have ended many lives. He had fought without hesitation and had inspired not only the Queen but those around her. In his chambers, Ryan reflected on the events. His arm had healed, yet the memory of his bleeding remained. It was a reminder that courage and endurance mattered more than strength alone. He knew that the coming days would test him further, but he also knew that the Queen now understood that humans could endure far more than her people had believed. Queen Cyril, in her private hall, looked out over the city once more. The red of the setting suns reminded her of the humans' blood, bright against the crystal towers. She had flinched when she first saw it, and that flinch had awakened something inside her. Humans were not weak. They were not fragile. Their strength came from their will, from their courage, from their ability to endure when others would fall. That realization changed everything. The bond between the Queen and the human envoy deepened, though neither spoke of it directly. A quiet understanding grew between them, built on mutual respect and the recognition of courage. She no longer saw him as just a human. He had become a symbol of endurance, a living reminder that strength was measured not by size, skill, or weapon, but by the spirit that refused to break. And as night fell, both of them looked toward the horizon. Two worlds, once enemies, now connected by trust and understanding. The future was uncertain, but the first steps toward lasting peace had been taken. The human had bled for the Queen, and in doing so had taught her and her people the meaning of true courage. The first test of understanding had passed. The next challenges would be harder, but the Queen now knew that humans could face them. Their spirit was stronger than anyone had imagined, and the bond forged through trust and endurance would shape the future of both their worlds. The morning on Zirin was quiet, almost peaceful. The twin suns rose over the crystal towers, scattering colors across the smooth streets. For the first time in decades, the city felt calm. The failed attack at the North Gate had left a deep impression on everyone. Citizens, guards, and even the counselors had seen a human act with courage and resilience beyond what they expected. Rian Vale walked through the palace courtyard, his arm now fully healed. His uniform was spotless, but faint scars along his side and shoulder remained as reminders of the injuries he had endured. He carried himself with the calm confidence of someone who had faced death and returned. The Queen's guards, once suspicious, now bowed to him with respect. Even the counselors who had doubted him could not deny what they had witnessed. Queen Cyril watched from her balcony. Her glowing eyes followed him as he moved among her people. She felt a mix of pride and something deeper, a recognition that humans were unlike any species she had ever encountered. They were not only resilient physically, but also courageous in ways that defied expectation. The human before her had bled for her and her people, and yet he had stood firm. The day's council meeting was about to begin. Delegates from Earth had arrived at the palace to participate in the peace talks. The room was filled with Zirin officials and human representatives. A holographic map of the galaxy floated above the table, showing the system still recovering from war. Rian stood beside the Queen as both sides prepared to discuss terms. He noticed tension among the Zirin generals. They were still wary, their memories of war fresh. Some of the human delegates appeared anxious as well. Ryan's voice was calm when he spoke to them. Peace is not easy. It requires understanding and courage. We cannot demand it, but we can show it. The Queen's translator orb activated, conveying her words to everyone. We have seen the courage of one human. We now understand that strength does not come only from numbers or technology, but also from the spirit that refuses to break. Whispers filled the room. The counselors were surprised by the Queen's declaration. They had expected negotiations to begin with threats and caution, yet here she stood, openly acknowledging the human's strength. It was unprecedented. An advisor spoke quietly. "Your Majesty, the human cannot define the future of our worlds. You must not let admiration cloud judgment." Siral turned to him, her gaze firm. "This human has shown more courage than many of our soldiers. He has bled for us. That alone demands respect. If we do not learn from this, then we risk repeating the mistakes of the past." The delegates from Earth nodded, impressed by the Queen's acknowledgement. The atmosphere shifted from tension to cautious optimism. The first words of cooperation were spoken, tentative yet meaningful. After the council meeting, Ryan returned to the courtyard to train. Cyril followed, watching him move. She noticed the discipline in every step, the precision in every motion. He trained not for himself, but for the example he set. His endurance was more than physical. It was a lesson in courage. "You never tire," she said, walking beside him. Ryan paused, breathing evenly. "We tire, but we do not give up. Endurance is not the absence of fatigue. It is the choice to continue despite it." The Queen considered his words. She had spent years commanding armies, but even her strongest soldiers could not inspire loyalty and trust the way this human did. His courage was not loud or boastful. It was steady, consistent, and unshakable. That was what made him extraordinary. Later that evening, an unexpected message arrived. One of the Zyran border worlds reported a potential threat, a fleet moving near human space without warning. Panic began to spread among some counselors. Cyril called Ryan immediately. "They fear your kind," she said. "Some believe humans will take advantage of their mistakes." Ryan looked at the holographic map of the approaching fleet. "Then we show them again what humanity means. We do not fight recklessly. We act with courage and strategy." Cyril nodded. She realized she trusted him completely. The human had bled for her, had protected her people, and had earned her respect and confidence. Together, they would face this new challenge. The next morning, the fleet approached Zyran space. Ryan stood on the command deck of a Zyran transport, flanked by Queen Cyril and her top generals. The ships moved swiftly but without immediate aggression. The humans and Zyran soldiers prepared, expecting a confrontation. Ryan spoke calmly to the assembled fleet officers. "Our strength is not in destruction. It is in unity, courage, and the willingness to endure. If we show them that we are prepared but not aggressive, we can avoid conflict and build trust." The Queen watched him closely. His logic was simple yet powerful. Humans acted with strategy, even when their bodies had been tested and wounded. She realized again that courage and intellect together made humans formidable. When the approaching fleet saw the organized defense and the confidence of both humans and Zyran forces, they paused. There was no immediate attack. Ryan moved to communicate with their commanders, speaking directly and clearly. The human words, coupled with the Queen's presence, sent a message of strength and reason. Minutes turned to hours. Finally, the fleet signaled retreat. The threat had been neutralized without a single shot fired. The Zyran soldiers cheered, and even the Queen allowed herself a faint smile. Later that night, in her private hall, Cyril spoke to Ryan quietly. "You have done what many thought impossible. You have prevented war without shedding more blood. You have shown our worlds that humans are not to be underestimated." Ryan nodded, weary but satisfied. Courage and reason can change the course of events. Strength alone does not win battles. The Queen studied him. "And yet it took your blood and your wounds for me to understand. Your injuries. They taught me more than any report or observation ever could." Ryan smiled faintly. "Then perhaps my purpose here is more than diplomacy. Perhaps it is to show that courage and endurance matter." The Queen's expression softened. "They do. You have proven it. Your people have proven it. And now, the future of both our worlds depends on that understanding." Over the following days, humans and Zyran worked together openly. Trade agreements were signed. Cultural exchanges began. The scars of war were slowly replaced by bridges of trust. Citizens who had once feared humans now saw them as capable allies. Soldiers learned new strategies and ways to endure, inspired by Ryan's example. The Queen often visited him in his quarters, sometimes to speak about strategy, other times simply to observe. She had never felt such respect for another being. The human's courage, resilience, and calm determination had not only saved lives, but had changed her perception of humanity entirely. One evening, as the sun set, the Queen and Ryan stood together on a balcony overlooking the city. The twin moons reflected on the crystal towers, casting soft light across the streets. "Do you think peace will last?" Ryan asked. Saral looked at the horizon. "It will if we remember what we have learned. Courage, endurance, and trust, these are stronger than fear, stronger than hatred. You have shown me that. You have shown my people that." Ryan nodded. "Then we must continue to show it, in action and in example." The Queen placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. It was a gesture of trust and respect. "Your wounds have healed," she said. "But the mark you left on our world is permanent. You changed the way we see humanity. You changed the way I see humanity." Ryan smiled faintly, feeling the weight of her words. "Then perhaps humanity's true strength is not in our bodies, but in our choices. To endure, to act, to protect those who cannot protect themselves. That is what defines us." The Queen watched him, understanding fully for the first time why humans were feared and admired across the galaxy. They were fragile in form, yet unbreakable in spirit. They could bleed, they could hurt, but they would rise again, stronger and wiser for the pain. From that night onward, the bond between the human envoy and the Queen grew stronger. It was built on respect, trust, and the lessons learned through courage. Stories of the wounded human who had protected the Queen spread across Xiran and Sol, inspiring generations. Years later, when the peace was fully established, the people of Xiran would still speak of the human who had bled for their Queen, and the Queen who had learned to see strength in a form she had never expected. The scars on Ryan's body had healed, but the mark he left on the hearts and minds of two worlds remained. And so, the galaxy learned a lesson. Courage is not measured by size, power, or numbers. It is measured by the choice to act when others falter, by the willingness to endure pain and danger for the sake of something greater. Humanity had shown that through one wound, one act of bravery, and one unwavering spirit. In the palace of Xiran, under the glow of twin moons and the rising suns, Queen Saral looked upon the human envoy one last time. He had bled, he had fought, and he had endured. And in doing so, he had not only saved her life, but had changed the course of two worlds forever. The human's name was Ryan Vale, and the galaxy would never forget the courage he had shown, the trust he had earned, and the lesson he had imparted. That humanity's greatest strength lies not in the body, but in the spirit that refuses to break. The future was bright, the two worlds united, and the wound that once caused shock and disbelief had become the symbol of hope for all.